How do you interview a suspect to get to the truth? I'm Deception Detective. I'm an attorney trained in statement analysis, and this channel exists to expose lies and manipulation. Before we proceed, please hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the notification bell. In today's episode, we're going to watch an interview of Kate and Jerry McCann, the parents of Madeleine McCann, from 2011 that they did with Piers Morgan. So I have not watched this interview yet. We're going to watch it together and see if we can find some clues about what happened to Madeleine in the responses they give to Piers' questions.
Thank you for sitting down with me. Today is the 8th birthday that Madeleine would have enjoyed had she been with you. We still have no idea where Madeleine may be or what's happened to her. You've written a book, Kate, about your experiences. It's based on diaries that you wrote from a few weeks after she'd vanished. Why have you done the book?
I suppose my reason for writing it all down is quite different to the reason to publish it as a book. And initially when I started to keep my diaries, it was really so that Madeleine would have an account. So when we found her, I'd be able to fill in the gaps. And also Sean and Emily as well for when they were older. And then going back to sort of 2008, I actually filled in the gaps before I'd started keeping my diary.
If you've seen my previous videos about the McCanns, I've got 3 videos already. You know that it is my opinion that the parents accidentally killed Madeleine by giving her too much sedative and then discovering her body dead and putting her somewhere cold, like the ocean. And the reason I think that is because of leakage. So things that they said in interviews that were unscripted. So things that they said unprompted, like Jerry's saying that he was expecting the police to have thermal cameras on their helicopters to look for Madeleine, which doesn't make sense if you're looking for a missing girl, because a thermal camera would bring up everybody, right? So even if a thermal camera spotted a lone man and a little girl, it would just look like a father and daughter. But thermal cameras could bring up a lone body out in the middle of somewhere like a bay floating in the water before all the heat is dissipated. So slip-ups like that are why I have this hunch that they are responsible. However, the McCanns are good at lying, and I think they are lying, when they have a chance to script something. So for example, if you saw my previous video where we analyzed the way Kate described the window in Madeleine's room, in 2 separate interviews, she described walking in and finding that window open and the curtains blowing, almost word for word, right? So it wasn't verbatim, but all the same beats were there, which is a sign of scripting. And I feel like this, again, right here, when Kate talks about why she wrote the book, is scripted, because she's been asked about this book in another interview we analyzed, and her response was almost verbatim the same, right? I wrote this so that when we eventually find Madeleine, she can be clued into what happened and the twins can also know, right? It's almost the same verbatim answer. Now, does that mean she is lying? No, right? If this was the only interview I'd ever analyzed, the only words I've ever seen her speak, I would not think she's a liar, right? We need more than one sign of deception before concluding that someone is lying. However, if you've seen this playlist, and I recommend you watch this one after this video, if you've seen that playlist, you know I already think they're liars. So when they say something that rings true, I ignore it, right? And that is how statements are typically analyzed. If something sounds truthful, we ignore it and actually focus on the things that are deceptive. Because a true story doesn't have any, or at least does not have many deceptive markers. Whereas a fake story can have lots of truthful sounding statements, because much of what people say is true, even when they're trying to deceive you, right? Because they lie by omission. So if they've had time to script and they're telling 99% true things, except for the critical part where they have to lie, like going into the room and thinking that Maddie wasn't there and seeing the window open, which I think is a lie. It's best to just ignore truthful sounding things.
My diaries, so a little bit about me and Jerry and our backgrounds, and again, that was all just for the kids. I suppose there's always been the urge to get the truth out there, obviously, when there's been so many stories written, but we've always had things to weigh up. I mean, ultimately, Madeleine's fund was running out, and I knew that we'd need to raise money really to continue the search.
So all the money from this book is going to go to the Madeleine Fund?
It is, yes.
So that you can continue to try and find out what happened to her?
That's right.
Jerry, obviously, that is the crux of this, isn't it, for you?
Absolutely.
You just don't know. I mean, I'm a father of 3 children. I cannot imagine. I can remember my kids disappearing for a minute or 2 minutes, and that awful panic that you feel as a parent when that happens. To be here years later and have no idea where she is or what may have happened, it must be excruciating, isn't it?
It certainly was, and I think one of the reasons we've had so much public sympathy and empathy is I think every parent does know that feeling when your child is out of sight, even for a few seconds.
It's interesting that Jerry said it certainly was excruciating, and this is something I've said in a previous video. If your kid is missing, the trauma, the excruciating pain isn't over, right? It's not referred to in the past tense. So if Jerry really thought Madeleine were missing right now and not dead, he should say something like, it is excruciating because we don't know what's happening to her right now. It's been 5 years. I don't know if she's been sold to some slavery ring. I don't know anything that's happening to her. It is excruciating. But it's interesting that he says it was excruciating. Was indicates that he knows Madeleine is at peace now, right? The traumatic event is over. It's expired, right? When Madeleine died, that was excruciating and painful and extremely traumatic, but it's over now. She's at peace now. So you'll notice a difference between when the McCanns have scripted something, like for example, when Kate said at the start of this interview, for when we find Madeleine, which implies that they believe she's still alive, and when they reveal their true thoughts through leakage, like right now when Jerry said it was traumatic, indicating through his words, right, that he does not believe Madeleine's ordeal is ongoing. She's at peace now. It's over, but it was terrible. And I know in the comments from my other videos, lots of people think this is a big leap to make. However, if you watch parents of true missing children, they don't make these sorts of errors, right? Kate and Jerry McCann must be in their 40s in this video. They've been speaking the English language for 40 years. When something is ongoing, you refer to it in the present tense. When something has occurred and that event is over now, you refer to it in the past tense. So grammar is something that is very rare to mess up. And actually, you can tell an embedded confession. So when someone commits to something, usually through a grammatical error that they make. And I've caught Nadia this way. If you haven't seen my video about Nadia, a video game player who admitted accidentally through her own words that she cheated on a video game. And I made that conclusion a year ago, and just a few weeks ago, she was finally banned by that video game. Right? So the method works as big as a leap as you might think it is. So my personal opinion is I'm convinced the parents know that Madeleine is dead.
Seconds and the panic it generates, and obviously for any family like ourselves whose child has been abducted, it is the most terrifying experience.
The other thing is they continuously say that Madeleine has been abducted, and this is one sign that they're lying, right? So hoaxers are conclusive. There might be any number of things that happened to Madeleine, and a parent of a missing child will want to keep all options open. And even the McCanns contradict themselves in other interviews when they say, please find it in your heart. If you know anything about what happened to McCann, let us know any fragment, any detail. So acting like they're keeping all options open. But then with statements like this, they immediately contradict themselves, right? When she was abducted, so it's conclusive. So which is it? Was she conclusively abducted? Or do people need to search their minds to remember any sort of detail so they might eventually find her, depending on what happened? So the conclusiveness is another red flag we've seen in every video of the parents.
But you do adapt, and the pain is not as raw. But you know, we do still manage to get some enjoyment in our life, and we've got 2 other beautiful children who are fantastic. And the support we've had from the public has really helped carry us through. But there's just always something inside, and the pain is never too far away from the surface.
I mean, Kate, do you ever have
That is a very interesting statement. So as you know from my previous videos, I believe the McCanns put Madeline's body in the ocean based on numerous things that Jerry has said, right? When he was expecting the thermal cameras, I assumed they put her somewhere cold. And then at one point he mentioned they were near the coast where boats would be. And it didn't make sense, because was their theory that a smuggler broke into their house, kidnapped Madeline, and took her onto a speedboat to to zoom to Spain, like a special ops mission, right? Like it was SEAL Team 6 kidnapping her. It didn't make any sense. But the fact that he mentioned boats and the coast was, the way I understood it, leakage. And leakage is a phenomenon by where you reveal the truth through your word choice. So lying is very difficult. And if you're making up a story about someone kidnapping your daughter, it's very difficult not to let the truth come out if the truth is that you accidentally killed her and put her body in the water. Your word choice might actually reveal your true thoughts. And this actually happened to me in a previous video. So one of you guys, a very perceptive subscriber, commented that I was referring to the Madeline case in ways that revealed my true thoughts about what happened to Madeline. So for example, I was saying things like, can we get to the bottom of this case? And it's because when I was talking in the video, I was picturing Madeline at the bottom of the ocean. So when I said get to the bottom of this case, it made perfect sense, right? I didn't plan those words before, but my mind picked those words out of any of the thousands of expressions I could have used, likely because that's what was on my head, Madeline being at the bottom of the ocean. I also, in that previous video, and I watched it again after I saw that comment, said a couple times, it was in the one with the Spanish language interview that I was translating. I think it was this one, How to Analyze a Suspect. I said I haven't done a deep dive into Spanish in a while because I was translating and I was worried I might have been making some grammatical errors with my Spanish. And I said I haven't done a deep dive into Spanish in a while. That is an odd choice of words, right? It's not like I sat there and planned it. I was just talking off the cuff. But it is a kind of a weird way to say it, right? It would be better to say I haven't spoken Spanish in a while or brushed up on my Spanish in a while. You don't do a deep dive into a language, right? So even myself, I was leaking the truth, and all I was doing was just imagining what I thought happened to Madeline. So imagine how hard it is to not let anything leak through your word choice when you actually have a memory of what happened to her. So listen to Jerry's word choice here. And the only reason I picked it up is because I'm listening for it, right? But if you guys picked it up, drop it in the comments that you picked it up at the same time I did. But listen to this again. Listen to this response.
But, you know, we do still manage to get some enjoyment in our life, and we've got 2 other beautiful children who are fantastic. And the support we've had from the public has really helped carry us through. But
so carry us through. Is that a perfectly reasonable explanation? Yes, right? But there's other ways to phrase it. And I think it's because he's picturing carrying Maddie's body through the door or through the doorway, out of the room, into the water, right? So carry through, but there's a second expression. So listen to this.
But there's just always something inside, and the pain is never too far away from the surface.
The pain is never too far away from the surface. What has a surface? A body of water. The pain is never too far away from the surface. I think this is leakage. Now, am I going to take all my poker chips and bet that he's revealing the truth through his words? No, right? But enough odd phrases can equal something, right? Enough drips of leakage can equal a river. Also, if I'm developing a theory like I am, it is important to note potential instances of leakage so that I can maybe use them to bolster my confidence in my theory, right? So leakage is particularly difficult because if you are biased, and some might say I am biased by the time I'm watching this video because I've analyzed 3 other videos of them. If you're biased, you can use it subjectively to support just about anything, right? However, I am taking note of it. So listen to how he phrased it. The pain is never near the surface. If that is, our pain is never too far from the surface. So if let's say this were leakage, let's say they found Madeline's body in a shallow pool of water. Would I be surprised? No. Right, so leakage is a real phenomenon. If you've binged all my videos, and I know lots of you have by now, and thank you, I think that's the best way to pick up these skills is to just binge all my videos. You will start absorbing the skills. Leakage is real. If you've binged all my videos, you've seen plenty of examples of it. We picked up that Liver King was taking steroids through leakage before he confessed to it. We picked up that Nadia was cheating through leakage before she was caught. That Logan Paul would not pay back CryptoZoo investors before 10 months ago, right? Or however long ago, before he actually didn't do it. And there's famous examples of leakage like O.J. Simpson, right? If you haven't seen my video on O.J. Simpson, there's tons of leakage there. And a particularly famous case in statement analysis circles brought up by Robert McClish and Peter Hyatt, where a father of a missing daughter said, we're drained, right? So when he was asked what it's like to have his daughter missing for so long, he said, we are drained, right? Something along those lines. I'm drained. Not too long later, his daughter's dead body was found in a storm drain, right? So choices of words can be coincidental, but they can also be leakage, and you should be finely attuned to it. So let's listen to him again here.
And the support we've had from the public has really helped carry us through, but there's just always something inside, and the pain is never too far away from the surface.
The pain is never too far away from the surface. If Maddie's bones were discovered in a shallow pool of water, I would not be surprised. And I would be posting this clip right now that I'm saying of this video to prove that the leakage predicted it, right? But right now we're just taking note of it. It is an odd phrase. Same with carry us through is odd. Also, I had in my previous video in the comments lots of people saying, you know, this is just a British phrase, or this is how we speak in Britain, right? None of the phrases you guys pointed out are unique to Britain, right? They're said everywhere, including America, right? To be honest is a verbal crutch that exists in the UK, Australia, every English-speaking country. My point about to be honest are phrases like carry us through, right? They are true phrases and they're commonly used. However, we note when they're used because people don't always use expressions and they don't always use verbal crutches, right? So if Kate McCann had started every response with, well, to be honest, then we could ignore it because she answers every question with that verbal crutch. However, she didn't do that, right? She used that verbal crutch on particular responses, which is why we take note of it, because it does indicate sensitivity when someone uses a verbal crutch. Just like Jada Pinkett Smith uses the verbal crutch, you know what I mean? Right? So does she always say, you know what I mean, after she answers a question? No, of course not. But when she does use it, we take note of it because it indicates some sort of sensitivity where she felt the need to use a verbal crutch to wrap up the sentence or to start the sentence. Does it mean they're lying? Does it mean some bombshell? No, right? But it does indicate sensitivity about the question or about their own response. That's what verbal crutches are.
I mean, Kate, do you ever have a day where this doesn't consume you?
I don't think it consumes every minute as it did before, but certainly, you know, Madeline's absence is there constantly. I mean, as Jerry said, although we do have lovely times at Sean and Emily, and although I've now reached that point where I will allow myself to take time out and just relax or enjoy something, you know, her absence is still tangible. And we can have a lovely family day, but as Sean will point out, it's not really a family day, Mummy, because Madeline's not here. You know.
If you can.
Another thing you'll notice with the McCanns, I think lots of people pick this up intuitively, is they don't report emotions. So one way liars can fool body language experts like the behavior panel is to display emotions, right? To cry or look weepy. Body language people can get fooled like that, especially by a good actress, right? So I think the behavior panel actually believes the McCanns are innocent, right? So they and I are in disagreement on this one. And that's because I think they've seen interviews. I haven't watched their analysis. I've just been told in the live chat, right, that that's what they believe. I think it's because they've seen in interviews Kate and Jerry act sad, right? Which makes sense. Whether you killed your kid by accident or she was actually kidnapped, you're going to be sad, right? So people can be fooled by displayed emotions. However, the McCanns do not report the appropriate emotions. So if you look at all these questions, they never say, we were sad, or yes, I'm depressed. She's actually only reporting positive emotions, which is bizarre, right? So listen to this question again. Piers Morgan asks her, is there a day that you're not consumed with sadness? See if she reports any sad emotions, right? So as cold as it sounds, ignore the weepiness of the mother or the downcast eyes or whatever it is that body language people look at, right? Or the tone of the voice, and just listen to the words. Because liars typically are good actors, right? Psychopaths are great actors, but they do not have the imagination to report emotions they didn't feel, right? That is a very difficult thing for liars to do, is to report made-up emotions. Right, so I can act sad while I'm talking to you. A psychopath can definitely act sad and weepy. However, they will fail to report the appropriate emotions. So picture if you are the mother of a missing child, how would you answer this question? What emotions would you report? And Piers is giving them the perfect platform to report their sadness.
The pain is never too far away from the surface.
I mean, Kate, do you ever have a day where this doesn't consume you?
I don't think it consumes every minute as it did before, but certainly, you know, Madeline's absence is there constantly. I mean,
right, so does she actively say that she's in pain? No, right? She says it doesn't consume me. Madeline's absence is there. That can all be true, but she's not reporting her own sadness.
As Jerry said, although we do have lovely times.
The only emotions she's reporting are positive ones, right? We have lovely times.
Sean and Emily, and although I've now reached that point where I will allow myself to take time out and just relax.
I will relax, right? So every emotion she's positively reporting is a positive one. And to me, this is an indicator that they've processed Madeline's death, right? They have gone through the grief and sadness, and now they've processed the death and they're moving on. If your kid is missing, you don't go through that process, right? You never complete the grieving process. And that's why it's so torturous. Because you never know what's happening to the kid. You can wake up in the middle of the night wondering what's happening to them. Parents feel guilty about enjoying themselves when their kid is missing, right? Because I'm out here enjoying myself and she's dead. I mean, no, sorry, not dead. Right? She's out there being tortured or wondering where her mommy is. So, you know, is she getting fed enough food? Is she cold? She's sleeping on a hard floor. Did someone give her a bed? These questions keep them up at night. But if your child has died, as traumatic and terrible as it is, you know that the pain is not ongoing, right? There's no open questions. You are able to process it, as sad as the rest of your life might be, right? You are able to process it. And if you're religious, you're able to imagine them in a better place, right? So there is some degree of comfort.
So enjoy something,
Well, not comfort, catharsis, right? It's still an extremely terrible thing to have.
where absence is still tangible. And we can have a lovely family day, but as Sean will point out, it's not really a family day, Mummy, because Madeline's not here.
It's also strange. She says that one of the kids has to point out it's not a lovely day because Madeline's not there, right? So it's one of the kids who actually has to point out to her that's not a lovely day. Because the kids might actually believe she's still out there, so they probably haven't processed it yet.
Where absence is still tangible. And we can have a lovely family day, but as Sean will point out, it's not really a family day.
So Sean has to point it out to her.
Because Madeline's not here.
Have you considered having another baby? Has that even entered your thought process?
No, I think you probably know, obviously, our 3 children were born with the help of IVF. So it wouldn't exactly be straightforward anyway. But can't replace Madeline. And I know you're not suggesting that, but I don't know. I think all the grief that we've been through and the busyness of everything.
So that's the first negative emotion she's reported, right? The grief. So finally, they're reporting some negative emotion. But you'll notice how rare it is for them to report that in contrast to positive emotions, right? Like you can relax, or we enjoyed a family day. And I think lots of mothers out there recognize that on an intuitive level, how bizarre that was. So regardless of if they're cold or whatever, they appear cold or they appear sad, that doesn't really concern me, right? Because people can act. There's not much I can glean because people are very good at acting. But we can listen to what they say. And I think intuitively people recognize that they are not reporting the degree of sadness that the parent of a child who is still out there would feel.
I think. And obviously we've got, Sean and Amory that we need to concentrate on.
Do you both 100% believe she's still alive, or do you...
Okay, good question from Piers. As you know, if you've seen my Hans and Neiman video, I am a fan of Piers Morgan as far as TV interviewers, right? Would I be able to do a better interview than him of them? Yes, probably, right? But Piers is good at being entertaining and pushing his subjects a little bit, which is why I like him, right? Whereas if I were to interview them, it would be purely for elicitation, right? There would be no entertainment purpose.
Busyness of everything. And obviously we've got, Sean and Amory that we need to concentrate on.
Do you both 100% believe she's still alive, or do you have to believe that?
I don't think we can say 100%. I mean, we're realistic. We know there is a chance that she may not be alive. But what we do know is there's a very good chance.
So notice how they contradict themselves, right? They say conclusively that she's kidnapped, right? Someone abducted her. But then they also contradict themselves. And I think that this is because they have scripted responses for this type of question. Now they leave open the possibility that she might be dead. Right, so that's one way to tell a liar is the contradictions. Also, at this point, I just want to hit these lessons I want to teach you in this video. So when someone's fabricating a story, so like the McCanns, right? I believe that they fabricated the story about what happened to Madeline. I believe that they found her dead, and then they concocted this story about the window being open in order to point investigators in that direction, right? So they had to come up with something. They wanted people to believe she was abducted. So they talked about the open window, and had this very beat by beat, almost like a movie script tale of her noticing the curtains billowing and the window, the shutters raised. Meanwhile, the twins never woke up during all this, right? So there's so many issues with it, but it seems scripted, right? So I feel like that part of the story is made up, right? It's fabricated. Now, the issue with fabricated stories is if you're going to fabricate a story, so lying by commission, right? So lying by making something up, it's hard because you have to do at least these 4 things, right? There's more bullet points, and I will drop those into the member section of the channel. But however, you have to make your story plausible. So you have to align your story with every known and every potentially discoverable fact, right? So every fact that might be discovered has to line up with your made-up story. And if one piece of evidence is found that doesn't align with it, your story gets debunked. So the McCanns have to be very careful when they're talking with interviewers about Madeline in the bedroom or the abductor. Otherwise, they can slip up. The other thing is the story has to be consistent, right? So a liar has to memorize their story perfectly, every detail, every beat, every potential question. Because just one inconsistency between interviews can unravel a fake story. Right? So it is very difficult to lie because your story has to match every potential fact that will ever be discovered. It has to be consistent across multiple interviews. Third, you have to be believable when you're telling your story. Right? So you have to be able to tell this story without any signs of deception. Otherwise, guys like me will catch you, right? Men and women like me will catch you. Because it is very difficult to lie believably, right? There's too much potential to slip up. And finally, the fabricator has to always suppress the truth. So you always speak based on everything you know. So they actually have to edit what they're saying in real time to edit out what they know about what actually happened and replace it with their made-up story. So a slip of the tongue can reveal them. Just like I think that when Jerry said, right, the pain is never far from the surface, was an example of leakage. The more stress someone is under, the more likely they are to have slips of the tongue and reveal things through leakage. Because they have to focus on all these other things, right? Their story has to be plausible, has to be consistent, it has to be believable. They're thinking about all these other things. So when they're editing their words before they speak, they can slip up a lot more. So when peers ask questions like this, I'm not surprised that they answer inconsistently, because this type of lying where you are fabricating and omitting other details is probably one of the most complex ways to lie.
I don't think we can say 100%. I mean, we're realistic. We know there is a chance that she may not be alive. But what we do know is there's a very good chance that she is alive, and there's certainly nothing to suggest otherwise. And as you know as well, there's many children who are found years down the line, and they could have been written off, and then they were found. So it would be wrong, it is wrong to give up on children who are still missing.
I mean, what is so strange about this story? And I remember...
It's also weird how she talks about other missing children rather than Madeline, right? So it'd be wrong to give up on other missing children. If your kid was missing, you don't need to talk about other missing children, right? Your sole focus can be your kid. So that last part is strange, where she talks about other missing children.
No, and then they were found. So it would be wrong, it is wrong to give up on children who are still missing.
I mean, what is so strange about this story, and I remember living through it here in England at the time, is there's just no evidence of anything. She just vanished.
Virtually.
Obviously there was a man seen carrying.
But we don't know who he was. We don't even know if that was Madeline. It could have been anybody. I mean,
we don't, but nobody came forward to eliminate themselves. Right. And obviously the timing of it,
So you believe from all that you know that shadowy figure that was seen with a young child was probably the abduction taking place. Is that what you think?
Yeah, completely. And I think, another aspect.
Right, so I think that guy completely, or the conclusiveness is the red flag. That could be one potential theory, right? So they clearly have an agenda. They want you to believe that a man took Madeline. And when Kate reported, right, when she was talking about first finding the window open, she said, right then I knew she had been taken. And that was the red flag, the biggest red flag of all, because that is not the first thought someone has, right? That is an option. It is not the only option. Just like this, it was another red flag when they never accused their friends, right? Weren't their friends who were with them also checking the bedroom? How could they be 100% certain it was not one of the friends, right? They never accused one of them of doing it because they knew what actually happened, right? So they don't think to accuse people who don't fit into their narrative about a man stealing Madeline.
Aspect about the book, I strongly believe a good reason for publishing it is putting these facts together about the sighting of the man carrying the child and the detail of that. Seen by her friend Jane Tanner. Jane hadn't seen him. She literally would have been plucked from thin air. But there's another sighting which Kate describes in the book that occurred about 45 minutes later, where an Irish family gave an almost identical description of the man and the child independently of Jane's. It wasn't in the public domain.
Let's get back to what happened. You were on holiday in Portugal. You were at a child-friendly resort, and at about 7:30 you were putting your kids to bed. You had the two-year-olds and you had Madeline, who was 4. Tell me what happened. Jerry, maybe you start.
This is why I like Piers, right? So this is great interview technique. And if you've seen my video, How to Interview Like a Detective, you'll know that this is a great example of an open-ended question. So if you are trying to tell if someone's lying or not, or trying to catch a liar in a confession, the best thing to do is A, don't put them on edge, right? So don't phrase the question in an accusatory way. And B, give them an open-ended question. Do not feed any words to them, right? Let them pick their own words and let them pick how they want to tell it. Why do you do that? So you can understand what they prioritize, because that will tell you a lot about the truth, right? It will tell you what they are sensitive about. By listening to what they prioritize, what they talk about, what they leave out, what they emphasize, these are all great details to glean. And the more open-ended the question, the more you get them talking. So the longer of a statement you have to analyze. So all that is to say, Piers knows what he's doing. Great question. Let's listen to the response. Listen along with me. And during the premieres, as you know, I have a live chat. So feel free to let me know your thoughts in the live chat. I think that's one of the most fun parts about doing these videos. So even if you're watching the video on replay, you should be watching with the live chat on for added details and the opinions of the other detectives. So let's listen now.
Well, it's interesting. We've always had a routine where the twins usually went to bed about 7, and Madeline used to have a little bit extra time. This was at home as well, and I'd played tennis.
So notice already, he's telling us about their habit. He's not telling us about that exact night. That's like if I asked you, did you steal my bike? And you say, it is not my habit to steal bikes. Right? Even back home, I never stole bikes. That's not telling me about the night in question, right? About the bike in question. So this is already a red flag, and we're 2 seconds into his answer. So listen again. Is he telling us about the night in question, or is he being vague in expanding the time frame so as to go on a tangent, give a response, but still be non-responsive?
It's interesting. We've always had a routine.
Okay, so
2-year-olds and you had Madeline, who was 4. Tell me what happened. Jerry, maybe you start.
Well, it's interesting. We've always had a routine where the twins usually went to bed about 7.
Right, so this is not the night in question. In court, you would have heard objection by now, right? The opposing counsel would be objecting to this because it's non-responsive, right? Piers asked him about the night Madeline went missing, not what is your usual customary routine and what you do back home. None of that interests us. So the fact that he's bringing it up is non-responsive. And if you saw the video I did about Christy Mack, which is an example of a real person, right? So someone who's not lying, you will notice how direct her responses are. She answers the question that was asked literally, directly, and without any added spin or details to persuade. That is how honest people answer, right? Whether it's a TV interview, a courtroom interview, talking to their friends, honest people's answers are much shorter and they are direct. So let's listen again. This is already off to a very bad start. So I hope you recognize just how bad of a start this is.
7, and Madeline used to have a little bit extra.
Sorry, maybe you start.
Well, it's interesting. We've always had a routine where the kids, twins usually went to bed about 7, and Madeline used to have a little bit extra time. This was at home as well, and I'd played tennis that evening, and Kate had...
So look how he's expanding the time. If you've binged all my videos, you know that this is one of the hallmarks of a hoaxer. So let me bring up the hallmarks of a hoaxer. If you don't follow me on X, you should, because I post these notes here in the highlights. So one of the hallmarks of a hoaxer is reticence about the money shot. And the money shot is the subject of the hoax. So in the McCann's case, what is the money shot? The money shot is the night in question. Because if they are lying, that is the segment of time they're lying about. They are lying about in my opinion, giving Madeline too many sedatives and then discovering her dead body, right? Or noticing she was dying and then hiding the body and then raising up false alarms. So in a story about a missing child, the time period when the child went missing is the money shot. So if someone is telling the truth, you expect them to want to talk about the money shot in great detail because it is the most important part of the story. It is the only part of the story we care about. However, liars are reticent about getting to the money shot. So even here, when prompted with a very straightforward question, what happened on the night in question? Look how Jerry is expanding the time frame to talking about playing tennis or talking about their bedtime routine at home. So do not be fooled by someone going on a non-responsive tangent. Right, that's what this is. In court, he would be hearing objection after objection. Right, so you should be able to recognize this in real time. Right, lawyers are not. We don't have superpowers. Right, it's just a matter of practice and knowing what to look for. Right, so a trial attorney would be objecting to this nonstop because it's non-responsive. They would tell him, please answer the question. What happened on the night in question? Start at 7:30. Etc. Right, putting him back on track.
Got the kids ready, so when I came back, we pretty much took them into the bedroom, read them a story, and tucked them into their cots for the twins, and Madeline into her bed, and we'd arranged to have dinner with her friends, and we're literally dining in the tapas area.
So notice how quickly he went over the money shot, right? This is when I suspect they gave Madeline too many sedatives. And he covers that in one sentence, right? We kind of tucked him in the bed, right? So there's a ton of hedging language as well. So let's listen again.
Got the kids ready, so when I came back, and Madeline used to have a little bit extra time. This was at home as well, and I'd played tennis that evening, and Kate had got the kids ready. So when I came back, we pretty much took them into the...
We pretty much took them. So one way to tell if someone is lying to you by omission is that they use phrases that tell you that they're not telling the whole truth. So, for example, pretty much means that what he's telling you isn't exactly what happened, right? We pretty much tucked them into bed, right? As innocent and as innocuous as that sounds, pretty much in the English language means that's not exactly what happened. And like I said at the start of this video, 99% of the time, if people are going to deceive you, they do it by omission, right? So they do it by leaving stuff out because that's much easier to do, right? You don't have to do all this stuff with plausibility and consistency and believability, leakage, because you can just edit stuff out. However, as a deception detector, I am able to tell when you are editing stuff out because there's certain phrases you use, right? So for example, the phrase pretty much means that you're editing something out, right? It means you're not telling me exactly what happened. Now, does that mean something nefarious happened? No, of course not. But it does mean that Jerry's answer does not tell us exactly what happened, right? So just be aware of that. If someone uses the phrase, yeah, that's pretty much what happened, or kind of what happened, or that's like what happened, just be aware that they are truncating the story, right? Or they're leaving part of the story out. And lots of the time, that's just because the other stuff is boring to tell you, right? So just saying, yeah, we pretty much just went to the bank and pulled out cash, right? They're not going to tell you that they stood in line or they tried the ATM first and then they had to go to the counter because the ATM wasn't working. But it still means they're editing something out. So it's not always nefarious. But in this case, when a girl went missing, right, their kid went missing around this time of night, it is unusual that they would be editing anything out, especially when peers ask them to go step by step, right? Tell us what happened that night. So just notice the truncation of the story.
The bedroom, read them a story and tucked them into their cot, got the kids ready. Twins usually went to bed about 7 and Madeline used to have a little bit extra time. This was at home as well, and I'd played tennis that evening and Kate had got the kids ready.
So Kate got the kids ready.
I came back, we pretty much took them into...
So we pretty much took them, right? So that doesn't mean, that means something else happened.
The bedroom.
We pretty much took them into the bedroom. Well, did you take them into the bedroom or not? And if there's a missing girl, then I want to know every detail, right? So it's not like saying, yeah, we pretty much went to McDonald's and got 2 Big Macs. That doesn't matter, right? You're editing out the boring part of the story. Here, a girl went missing. You are under suspicion of killing her by over-sedating her. You should not be truncating the story, right? So it's a red flag just based on the circumstances. I hope that makes sense, right? So I'm not saying if someone uses the phrase pretty much or kinda or sorta that they are a murderer. I'm saying in this unique circumstance, we do not want to hear the words pretty much.
Read them a story and tucked them into their cots for the twins and Madeline into her bed, and we'd arranged to have dinner with her friends, and we're literally dining.
And that's it, right? Now he's on to dinner. So that's a huge red flag. And like I said, that goes back to hoaxers and liars, where they are reticent to get to the money shot, right? So he was reticent to talk about what happened when they were preparing the kids for bed. But also he was vague about the money shot, right? We sort of, or what do you say, kind of took them into the bedroom, read them a story, tucked them in. What about brushing the teeth? What about locking the window? What about all the other details? They're gone, right? It's vague. And that is because Jerry and Kate McCann are not good liars. So they understand that they are not good liars, and they want to spend as little time as possible in that bedroom with us, talking about that bedroom. Because they know the longer and the more they talk about how they prepared the kids for bed, the more likely it is that there might be a discoverable fact that comes up and contradicts what they said. Or it's more likely that they might have an inconsistency between telling it today and the way they tell it tomorrow. Or they might realize that they're not being as believable as they thought, right? They might use a phrase that indicates deception like they did when he said pretty much. Or they might actually leak the truth by accident. Right? So they spent, that's the major point of this. Piers asked them what happened on the night Maddie went missing. That is a very high importance moment, and they dispensed with it in under 2 sentences. And now they're on to the dinner, right? Notice how little time they spent in the bedroom. He spent more time telling us about the routine back at home, tucking the kids in bed, and how he was playing tennis than actually describing preparing Maddie for bed. That is a red flag.
In the tapas area, which was adjacent to apartment as the crow flies. It's only about 50 metres away, which we'd done the 4 previous nights as well, coming back.
All right, so we're done with Maddie, preparing Maddie for bed. Now we're on to dinner, right? So that, you should notice how big of a red flag that is. He's spending more time telling us how far away the tapas restaurant is than the actual bedtime routine of Maddie and the kids. Did they switch on the lights? Did they leave a night light on? Right? This is all important, even if they actually thought she was kidnapped. If you actually thought someone broke into the bedroom and stole your kid, you'd be telling us, we double checked that the windows were locked. We closed the door to the bedroom. There's dozens of things. We put her into this bright pink nightie. So if you guys see that nightie, please let me know, because we tucked her into this particular nightie and it's very recognizable. Right, so they don't mention any of those details that someone would mention if their kid was actually kidnapped. Right, they skip over it very quickly, and it's a very clear sign of a hoax. And I have a whole playlist about hoaxers. So after you watch this one, this playlist about Maddie, the McCanns, I suggest binging the hoaxer playlist, and you'll be able to see lots of comparisons between Kate and Jerry McCann, and hoaxers about things as absurd as Bigfoot and aliens and UFOs and a whole bunch of other stuff. Right? The similarities are stark.
Back and forward to check the children.
This remains one of the highly contentious parts of this, because you're both professional medical people and you've got 3 very young children.
So I think here even Pierce recognizes in real time how little time they spent telling us about preparing Maddie for bed. So I think he's going to, just like a good attorney would, try to get them back on track and try to elicit more details from them now. He's going to take them back in time, right? And let's see if they skip over it just as quickly.
And I know that you've expressed regret over this, and I'm not after more of that. It would be completely pointless. In terms of the normal practice, though, when you were with them, would you ever have left them alone in that situation if you'd been at home, for example, back in England?
Definitely not. I mean, the closest thing that you would do to that, and it didn't feel that different, would be dining in your garden.
I mean, Kate, as a mother here, you must live through that all the time and beat yourself up about it. I've seen you do that, and I've heard you do that, and my heart goes out to you, because there's not a parent I know that hasn't mislaid a child at some stage.
All I can say is, if I'd have thought there was any risk at all, it just wouldn't have happened. And that's all I can say, really, and it's hard to...
I wonder if she's talking about the sedative, right? If I had known there was any risk at all of Maddie dying, it wouldn't have happened. I feel like Kate, when she talks a lot of the time, she's talking to herself. Like in another interview, she said, we need all these people in Spain to search their hearts and have the courage to tell the truth. Or something very bizarre statements. I think she, as the mother of Maddie, and probably the one who injected Maddie with the sedative, based on this response, right? If I had known there was any risk, it wouldn't have happened. It goes through a lot of inner turmoil.
Stage.
All I can say is, if I'd have thought there was any risk at all,
Also, notice how every other response was we, right? We tucked them in. We read them a story. But here she's saying I. And that's another reason I think she's talking about administering the sedative. Because she can't blame Jerry for that one, right? That's all on her. Now, could I be reading too much into this? Yes, of course, right? That's my point. That the leakage is something we need to note and we need to be aware of, but we cannot use it to spin, to weave our narrative, right? So I'm not saying that is exactly what happened, right? I'm prefacing everything with I think. Now, let's say it eventually comes out that Kate administered the sedative, as I think she did, and that they buried her, they took her little body and put it in the ocean, maybe in a shallow part of the cold ocean out there, would I be surprised? No. Would I be posting these clips up the same way I talk about Liver King and Nadia and Logan Paul and all the other liars we've caught? Yes, right? Because it would prove that I was on the right track with my leakage. But am I going to take all my poker chips in and say, hey, we should lock these people up? And that Kate's the one to administer it? No, right?
My heart goes out to you, because there's not a parent I know that hasn't mislaid a child at some stage.
All I can say is, if I'd have thought there was any risk at all, it just wouldn't have happened. And that's all I can say, really, and it's hard to, sometimes I think at home when I was going to the post office and I had the twins in the double buggy, because it wouldn't fit through the post office door, I used to get my aunt to come and meet me and just stand by the door, even though it's a tiny post office and I can see the buggy. So then I think, how does that equate with sort of how we ate in Portugal? And all I can say is it just felt so safe. It was a family-friendly resort. It's the first time I'd ever been to Portugal, but all the family and friends I knew that had been there said it's a lovely country and it's really safe and it's for families.
Jerry, a difficult question.
All right, so I think that she has a lot of inner turmoil. But I think it's because she administered the sedative to Madeline. Based on her own words, right? Just based on the leakage. And, right, you might be thinking to yourself, hey, I don't leak stuff in my own life. Well, as you can see, I leaked my own thoughts in my previous video. And if you are under the stress that they are under, you will leak too, right? Because the type of lying they're doing requires considering the plausibility of their story, the consistency of their story, right? They always say, as the crows flies. Every interview I've seen, right? I've watched like 3 or 4 of them now. As the crow flies, 50 meters. So they do script a lot of it to keep it consistent, right? So if you're considering plausibility, consistency, believability, suppressing leakage, right? So actually suppressing the truth while telling a lie and remembering the script between you and another person, right? So not only do they have to be self-consistent between their own interviews, they have to be consistent with each other's stories. So this is a very complicated, high stress, high cognitive load type of lying. So when I point out these small phrases or potential leakage, it's not so far-fetched. It's actually very likely that there is more leakage than we are even picking up on because of the stress they are under, right? Leakage comes through when you don't have the time to edit your words, when the truth just slips through because you always speak based on everything you know. And the old example I always give is, right, if I know I stole your cookie and you ask, did you take my cookie? I will reply differently if I know I took your cookie than if I know I didn't, right? I will pick different words. I will maybe say more words or fewer words. The answer will be different just based on the fact that I know I did it or I know I didn't do it, right? So you always speak based on everything you know. It's critical. If they know Maddie's dead, which I think they do, the words they choose are going to be different than if they know she's still alive. And from what we've seen in these interviews, they often pick words that indicate they know she's dead.
But obviously the resort you were in had lots of nanny facilities, and they weren't that expensive to use, and you both were professionals earning money. Another criticism that's put to you is, why didn't you just pay to have a nanny if you wanted to go out for dinner?
Yeah, it's not a question of money. We did what we thought was best in the kids' routines, and I think as parents, we had a very good routine in terms of the whole bath, bed, story type thing.
Also, right, the allegation, so this is some more leakage, if you think about what he's talking about, and this is the beauty of open-ended questions. Piers is asking them, do you feel bad about leaving them alone in the bedroom in Portugal while you went to have dinner? However, what is Jerry defending? So listen closely. Notice Jerry's priority. What is the word he continues repeating?
We thought was best in the kids' routines, and I think as parents, we we had a very good routine in terms of the whole bath, bed story.
Right, so Jerry is defending the routine, not leaving the kids in the bedroom alone. So this might indicate that it was actually routine to sedate the kids, to put them to sleep, or at least to sedate Maddie. Because it is unusual, right? He's talking a lot about the routine. He seems to not even be acknowledging the dinner. Right? I think that's because he's more sensitive about their routine of sedating Maddie. Also, I think it is well known, right? Aren't there studies that show if you take a drug, you're more likely to overdose, even with the same dosage of a drug, if you take it somewhere outside your home, right? So if someone's a heroin addict and they do it every day at home, and then they travel to Portugal and do it, even the same dose, they are more likely to overdose, just simply because the settings are different. They're under more stress, right? They don't have their, I don't know exactly why. I think that's a study. So it might have been routine to actually sedate Maddie, even with the exact same amount of sedative they gave her. But now she's in a different location, right? Going to sleep at a slightly different time zone, eating slightly different food, sleeping in a different bed.
Type thing. And I take your point, but for me, if your children are asleep upstairs in a bedroom and you're dining in the garden, you're out of sight and you can't hear them. And that's the similar thing to me.
Except I guess that most people's homes are secure.
Sure.
This was not a secure property. People could come in and off the street if they wanted to. That's where the criticism, I guess, comes at its most fierce towards you is, you're intelligent people and you were certainly good parents. There's no one's questioning that from all accounts that we've all heard. It's just when you have people coming in and off a street like that and it's not your home and it's not really secure.
Again, I think it's back to the safety issue. We did not perceive an element of threat, and child abduction is so rare. Why would you ever have thought that someone was going to get into an apartment and steal your child? It just didn't enter our head. If it had, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, we've been through all these questions.
It didn't enter our head. That is a weird phrase. So another thing we like to see when someone's telling the truth is they speak in the first person singular, right? That didn't enter my head. So that didn't enter our head. They always speak as we. And that's also why I keyed on when Kate spoke in the first person when she said, if I had known that was a risk. That's why I think it's one of the rare times where they speak for themselves, right? She spoke for herself, which is why I think she's the one who administered the sedative to Maddie that night, or the larger dose of sedative, and because she couldn't put that blame onto Jerry, right? So she said, right, if I had known, because she's not claiming it was her idea to leave the kids alone in the bedroom, right? They haven't said if one of them had that idea, which is another sign that they're co-conspirators and why I think they're lying. Because when a kid goes missing, the parents often get divorced, right? They bicker. It was your idea to leave her alone in the bedroom. Well, it was your idea to go to Portugal. But we never see any of that with them, right? There's no cross blame. And I think that's because Kate is the one who administered the sedative, and Jerry, being the dutiful husband that he is, and who probably also, concurred that they should give her a sedative, right? Like a doctor. They are both physicians, right? Concurred that they should get administered to it, is now sticking with her, right? So concocted the story with her and is standing by her side. And that's why everything is we. It's a lot easier to fabricate a story. And I think they may have picked up on that if we did everything, because then we don't have to say I was in this room and you were in that room. And our story is much more easily corroborated by each other. And there's a lot less chance for inconsistencies if we just say that we did everything. So the use of we is a sign of deception. If someone's saying we mean they're lying? No. However, they say we almost all the time, right? He's even speaking for her thoughts, which to me indicates scripting. And why when she said I earlier, it stood out to me, and why I read into it, right? So you have to notice patterns, but you also have to be able to notice the breaks in the patterns to detect the truth when someone's trying to deceive you. That's why, right, when I put these bullet points on X or in the members section of the channel, they are guidelines. You still have to, they are not the 10 Commandments written in stone, right? You have to be aware of these things, but you also have to be aware about the situation.
Questions day in, day out. Yeah. Why, how, why? And I can only, say to myself, well, Kate, you felt really safe, and I know how much I love my children, and there's no way I'd have taken a risk.
I think the worst thing, though, about the focus on our behaviour and...
Right, notice again, she switched to I. There's no way I would have taken a risk. This is the reason I think she administered the sedative.
It just didn't enter her head.
Imagine her talking about the sedative here, not about leaving the kids in the bedroom.
If it had, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah,
right, so listen to Kate.
We go through all these questions day in, day out. Yeah. Why, how, why? And I can only, say to myself, well,
or I can say to myself,
Kate, you felt really safe, and I know how much I love my children, and there's no way
I feel really safe. I know how much I love my children. I think these are things she told herself after Maddie died from the overdose of sedative.
Taking a risk.
I think the worst
I wouldn't have taken a risk.
Thing, though, about the focus on our behaviour and, if we could change it, we would have. We can't change it. But it takes the focus away from the abductor. And that becomes quite frustrating for us because...
Right, so once again, we don't know if Maddie's dead or alive, but now they're contradicting themselves, right? The abductor. So this is how you know part of their story is scripted, because when they speak candidly or off script, they contradict the stuff that sounds scripted.
Madeline's still missing, and that person or those responsible for taking her.
Right, that person. Right, and then he corrected himself, are those people who took her. Why do they say that person? Because they've concocted a story.
Are still at large, Piers, and that's what
somebody somewhere knows what's happened, and that must eat you up much more than fireside critics saying you should have done this, that, and the other.
Yeah, it's not like a double punishment. We have expressed that regret. It doesn't change it. And what we've tried to focus on from day one.
I think the other thing when they say it doesn't change it is I don't think they regret leaving the kids sleeping in the bedroom alone. Because let's say Maddie were kidnapped, that they would regret that. They would be kicking themselves over leaving her alone in the bedroom. But because they know that didn't change anything, just like you just said, right? They left her alone in the bedroom. It didn't change anything because she wasn't kidnapped. Right, she was given too much sedative and died, based on my hunch right now, right, in my opinion. So it makes sense that they don't regret leaving her alone in the bedroom. And all the critics who say, how could you dare leave her alone in the bedroom? Right, to the McCanns, those are all idiots because leaving her alone in the bedroom worked out just fine. Right, she wasn't kidnapped. She was, she wasn't kidnapped. If they hadn't overdosed her with sedative, it would have ended up just fine, right? So those critics don't bother them because leaving her alone in the bedroom is not the crux of the story. So we've been going over an hour here. We're 10 minutes into this interview. Let me know if you want me to do a part 2. We've watched 10 minutes of this interview and there's 30 minutes left. So there's plenty more to analyze. Until next time, stay true.